Hey guys, um, thought I'd do a PowerPoint for you in movie form. We'll discuss afterwards, but I want you to watch it first. This will be this will be our last real overview of Europe, and we'll talk about a test here a little later. But so we're just going to go quick over the geography of Europe. We've went over some of it through our scavenger hunt, through the Renaissance and other places, but here's just a basic overview, and we'll get started. So I'll start the slideshow here if I can. As it says, Europe is a peninsula, and it's made up of other peninsulas. So right here you'll see, right here a peninsula is water on three sides. So right here, this is called the Iberian Peninsula. Okay, so you have part of France, Spain, and Portugal in the Iberian Peninsula. You also have Italy as a peninsula. Right here, you can kind of see Italy is pretty recognizable as a boot right here, kicking a football right here, Sicily being the football. Denmark also sits on a peninsula, and you can see Sweden and Norway, the Nordic countries, Scandinavian countries also sit on a peninsula, and really you could say Greece is a peninsula too. So Europe is made up of a lot of peninsulas. What's really unique about Europe, especially in Germany, Czech Republic, Austria, it's a small continent. Second smallest behind Europe or behind Australia. Countries like Germany and France, Spain, countries that look fairly big, are not that big. France is a little bigger than Texas. Germany is a little smaller than Texas. So they're not incredibly big compared to the United States. And so our next slide says, our next slide shows just different peninsulas here. So the coastline of Europe, it says it's jagged and irregular, surrounded by oceans and seas. What it creates, as I think the next slide says, is it creates a lot of coastline. So you can see Italy has a huge amount of coastline here. You know, then Norway and Sweden here have a lot of coastline. Obviously, England's an island, and you have a lot of coastline in Spain. So you can see, as it says, Europe is third the size of Africa, but has 3 times the coastline. No part of Western Europe is more than 400 miles from the sea. So that's pretty cool. What's really cool is I think that biggest country, so you can go all the way to southern Germany, and that's no more than 90 miles from the sea. So it kind of shows the size of Europe. Effects of the coastline, like it says, it's great for trade. European countries have been trading and fighting with each other for centuries, a lot longer than any place in the United States, and it creates dependence on each other. The countries of Europe, especially the Western European countries, are more tight knit than most places like Africa or Asia or even North America and South America. These countries create a lot of the rivers that flow through these countries they flow through multiple countries, so they have to be dependent on each other so that they can get goods from one place to another. So Europe on its southern end is dominated by something called the Mediterranean Sea, as you can see here. You've probably heard of stories about the ancient Greeks, stories about the ancient Egyptians. A lot of their stories would revolve around the Mediterranean Sea. So I don't know if you guys have ever heard of the book The Odyssey. It's written by an ancient Greek guy named Homer, not Homer Simpson, but his name is just Homer. And he wrote this book, and his character in the book goes for an odyssey, or a long voyage, 7 years to be exact, through the Mediterranean Sea, and he sees all these different monsters and fights all these different things, and it's all the writings, ancient writings, really revolve around the Mediterranean Sea. So what you can see is the questions say, I'm not too worried about the questions. Where does the sea connect? And then what is the north? What is north of the sea? What is south? Really, you can see that we can get through out of the Mediterranean Sea into the Atlantic Ocean right here, south of Spain. So that's important, because if you're Greece, Italy, well, any countries on the southern coast, if you want to ship goods this way, okay, up to maybe England or something like that, it's important that you can get through here. And this is a natural strait right here, okay? Water on two sides. So the Mediterranean Sea, pretty cool. It's very unique, and it's very scenic. It's very comparable to like a Southern California for us. The weather's great. A lot of people, especially in France, in southern France, people vacation along the Mediterranean Sea. It's not a huge area, but it's a big vacation area, and like it'd be like us in North Dakota going to like Florida or Southern California. People go to the Mediterranean Sea because the weather is beautiful. I mean, it's 70 degrees, 80 degrees, and sunny almost every day of the year. Gibraltar, that's the strait I just showed you right here, the Straits of Gibraltar, where ships can get to the Atlantic Ocean. Pretty cool. You can see the ships in the background here, and people going, and those ships are waiting to go through the straits to get into the Atlantic Ocean. So it says the effects of the Mediterranean Sea. It allows people to spread ideas, cultures, empires, etc., etc. And what this map shows is it's the Roman Republic, 1st century BC. So the Roman Empire starts in Italy. Rome's right here, and you have all this area in red that was controlled by the Romans. And in the 1st century BC, this area was most of the known world. Eventually, it spread up to right here in England and even into northern Spain. So England was taken over by the Romans later on, and then fought back, and eventually the Roman Empire crumbled. But all this area in here was influenced by the Roman Empire. Another feature is the Pyrenees Mountains. As you can see, they block Spain and Portugal from the mainland Europe. So Spain and Portugal culturally are very different than, say, France, England, Germany. They completely block things because, you know, to get to this area, you have to cross the Pyrenees. And what's also unique is it isolated attacks from any place in Europe. So Spain was, like I said, very isolated for centuries, very rarely attacked. They built up, because of the blockage here, eventually Spain in the 1500s, and Portugal too, built up a great navy. And really that's how Spain became a world power for a short period of time, really the #1 power in Europe, until England beat them up in a war that happened in the English Channel, which is up here. Largest mountain range in Europe, you've probably heard of it, it's the Alps. So the Alps run through countries such as Switzerland, northern Italy, and you can see how this brown area, how much area it really affects. Like it says up here, Italy, France, Switzerland, Germany, and Austria. Really, your most well-known country in here is Switzerland, even though the map doesn't show it. Switzerland is a very isolated country in Europe, simply because they're surrounded by the Alps. And when they're surrounded by the Alps, it's very hard to, come in and invade Switzerland. So they really developed their own culture. They also were able to stay very neutral in a lot of wars that happened in other places, such as World War II. As it shows here, here's some pictures from the Alps. Pretty cool mountain range, looks a lot like the Rockies. And it's this is in an area called Bavaria, which is a famous area for many different things. Mainly, it's a famous area because it manufactures a lot of beer. So it's something that it's a tourist trap in areas down in Bavaria. The effects of the Alps, as it says, large mountain range limits cultural diffusion and creates cultural diversity. Diffusion meaning that people are isolated. They couldn't diffuse. They couldn't leak out into other areas. So this large mountain range prevents that. So people that are surrounded by the mountains, like it says here, may speak different languages because they were separated. Switzerland's an extremely small country, but has its own language. Places in Italy may speak different. In northern Italy, may speak different languages than people in southern Italy, just simply because they didn't work together at any point because the mountains were blocking that cultural diffusion, that where the cultures leak into other areas. Northern European plain, it talks about the wheat belt. Talks about the wheat belt, and the wheat belt is kind of like our Midwest, although it's a much smaller area. And really in France here, I don't know what happened to my mouse, but in France down there, it's considered one of the areas that's called the breadbasket of Europe. Not a ton of farming goes on in Europe simply because there's not much land, but it's definitely one of the areas that where the farming does happen. Affects the northern plain, like I said, it's called the breadbasket of Europe. Many Europeans farm and grow crops in this area, and as it shows down there, it shows a map with just various things that go on in Europe. Natural resources of Europe doesn't have a lot. It says, as it says here, coal, iron, soil, copper. Like I said, there's not a ton of natural resources simply because Europe's an old continent and many areas have been settled already. So they don't have a lot of room to mine all those natural resources in Europe. Affects natural resources because they don't have many. They have to trade each other to gain resources. Like it says, more interdependence, or they're dependent on each other. This leads Europe try to look elsewhere for supplies, and then where do they look? Well, they trade with the United States, Canada, Mexico, places with more supplies than they have. Rivers, as it shows here in bold, you can see all the rivers that are located in Europe. And one real important thing about these rivers, they flow to the sea, and two, they're navigable. Navigable means they're deep enough, they're wide enough to fit a boat through it that can, carry goods. So it's pretty important in Europe that they use all these rivers. Some of the famous ones, you have the Rhine in Germany, the Danube in France, and several other ones. You have the Seine in France also. Effects of rivers. Rivers are fantastic for transportation, as it says. People travel, they use the rivers to carry goods. The Danube there is shown in Hungary as it crosses several countries, and then the river, the Thames River in London, pretty famous river in a lot of like Shakespearean plays and writings that happened in medieval England. And that's the end of your slideshow. So just make sure that you answer the questions as you go along in the slideshow, and have fun watching it. I know how much you enjoy my slideshows.